My name is Camilla Hartwell. I'm 43 years old, and I never imagined I'd be sitting in a divorce courtroom in Austin, Texas, watching the man I once adored try to carve my life in half like it was a birthday cake he'd paid for. "I'm taking half your millions," my husband, Patrick Keller, announced with a smug grin, loud enough for the people in the back row to lean forward. "Including your grandmother's estate." He said it like he was reading the winning numbers off a lottery ticket. The confidence in his tone made my stomach twist, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I kept my hands folded in my lap, fingers laced so tightly my knuckles ached. Patrick sat across the room beside his attorney, looking like he'd already won. His expensive Armani suit, one I had bought, of course, was perfectly pressed. His sandy brown hair was slicked back in that polished, rehearsed way that used to charm me. Today, it just made him look like a man trying to play a role he didn't earn. "Your Honor," Patrick's attorney continued smoothly, "my client is entitled to half of all marital assets, including the substantial inheritance Mrs. Hartwell received during the marriage." His briefcase, Hermes, because apparently even lawyers needed to show off, was stuffed with documents. He tapped the stack like it was a weapon. Like paper could turn my grandmother's legacy into something Patrick deserved. Around us, the courtroom had that heavy, suffocating feeling. Dark oak paneling, stale air conditioning, and the low murmur of strangers pretending this wasn't entertainment. But it was. I watched spectators' eyes flick between Patrick and me like they were watching tennis. A few people were whispering numbers under their breath, like they were calculating what half of millions looked like in their own bank accounts. There were even reporters. I recognized one from the local paper, Austin Chronicle, her pen already moving, hungry for a headline about a tech entrepreneur divorce drama. And then there was Judge Martinez. She was in her 60s, stern and sharp, silver streaks in her hair pulled back neatly. She had the expression of a woman who'd heard every lie a person could tell, then heard them again, slightly reworded, by someone who thought they were clever. She flipped through Patrick's filings with a neutral face. Patrick turned slightly in his chair to flash me what he probably thought was a victorious smile. The audacity of it made my blood run hot. This was the same man who used to bring me breakfast tacos in bed, who used to cut my face like I was delicate and whisper, "I love you for you, not what you have." 5 years of marriage. 5 years of me thinking I was safe. And now he was sitting in front of a judge, trying to take my grandmother's estate like it was a prize for staying married long enough. Outside the courthouse windows, I could hear distant Austin traffic, normal life continuing, while mine was being dissected under fluorescent lights. I adjusted my purse on my lap, the strap biting into my wrist. Inside it, tucked behind my wallet, was a manila envelope. It didn't look like much. No glitter, no drama, just paper. But it was heavy in the way truth is heavy. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Judge Martinez looked up. "Mrs. Hartwell." Her voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Do you have any response to these claims?" My heart punched hard against my ribs. For a second, I saw myself from the outside. A woman in a conservative navy dress, hair pinned back, eyes too bright from too little sleep. A woman who looked composed because she'd learned over the years that people treated your pain like weakness the moment you showed it. I stood slowly. Patrick's gaze sharpened, like he expected me to beg or crack. I didn't. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "I believe there's something the court needs to see." The courtroom went so quiet I could hear the soft rustle of the reporter's sleeve as she paused mid-scribble. Patrick's attorney frowned. Patrick's smile twitched, like something in him sensed danger but didn't know where it was coming from. I could feel the envelope inside my purse, like a secret heartbeat. And as I stood there, I couldn't stop my mind from sliding backward. Back to the first time Patrick Keller looked at me like I was the answer to a prayer. Because if I'm honest, I didn't fall for Patrick when I was strong. I fell for him when I was grieving. 3 years before Patrick, my grandmother was my world. She raised me in the spaces my parents couldn't fill. She taught me how to keep my spine straight and my bank account separate. She taught me that charm was not the same thing as character. When she died, I didn't just lose a person, I lost my anchor. By then, I was 38, running my software consulting firm, Hartwell Tech Solutions, with moderate success and almost no life outside it. I was the woman people called impressive, the woman who gave conference speeches and fixed startup infrastructure like it was breathing. But when the hotel lights went out at night, I was the woman eating takeout alone, staring at my phone like it might light up with someone who truly knew me. Then came the tech conference in Dallas. I remember the moment clearly because it felt like a movie. Ballroom lights, name tags, the smell of coffee and cologne, people laughing too loudly to sound important. Patrick approached me like he'd already decided I belonged to him. "Camila," he said, reading my badge, "I heard you speak on digital optimization. That was unreal." His smile was warm. His eyes stayed on my face, not my chest. His compliments weren't lazy. "You're brilliant," he told me later, watching me review client proposals. "I've never met anyone who understands code and business the way you do." At the time, I thought he was impressed by my mind. Now, I know he was assessing my value, like a man appraising a house. He said he was a regional manager for a medical device company. He had nice shoes, a confident laugh, the kind of practiced charm that made people around him relax without realizing why. And he was attentive in a way that felt like rescue. He remembered things, my coffee order, my grandmother's name, the way my voice changed when I talked about work. He made me feel seen. Our courtship turned into a whirlwind. Expensive dinners at Franklin Barbecue, weekend getaways to South Padre Island, flowers delivered to my office like he was trying to prove something to everyone who might doubt him. I questioned the money once. "Patrick, how are you affording all this?" He laughed like I'd said something adorable. "I believe in investing in the people I care about," he said. "And I care about you." I ate it up like a starving woman offered bread. 8 months later, he proposed. Lake Austin, private dinner cruise, a string quartet, my favorite song played soft over the water while the city lights shimmered like a promise. The ring was stunning, too stunning. It should have made me pause. It should have made me ask questions. But I was in love with the idea that someone wanted me, fully, urgently, without hesitation. My attorney, Sarah Williamson, did what my grandmother would have done if she were alive. She insisted on a prenup. "Camila," Sarah told me in her office, voice gentle but firm, "any successful woman needs protection. It's not romantic, it's practical." I hated the conversation. I hated that love had to be translated into legal language. Still, I brought it up to Patrick, nervous he'd accuse me of being cold. Patrick's reaction was effortless. He laughed, waved a hand, and said, "Of course, sweetheart, whatever makes you comfortable." Then he added, soft as a vow, "I'm not marrying you for your money. I'm marrying you for you." When I slid the papers across the table, he didn't read them. He signed like it was a restaurant receipt. "Love doesn't need fine print," he joked, scribbling his name with a flourish. I remember feeling relief flood my chest. I remember thinking, see, he's different. I didn't know I'd just watched a man sign away his future because he was too arrogant to imagine consequences. Back in the courtroom, Judge Martinez waited, eyes on me. Patrick shifted in his seat, impatience flickering beneath his confidence. And I realized, standing there with my purse heavy at my side, that the moment Patrick had been planning for was finally here. He thought he was about to take half my life. He didn't know he was about to lose everything. I reached for my purse. My fingers closed around the edge of the manila envelope, and the courtroom held its breath. Before I handed that envelope to the judge, before Patrick's confidence cracked in front of a silent courtroom, there was a moment that should have warned me. 18 months into our marriage, my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing a client's infrastructure audit. It was the estate attorney. My grandmother had left everything to me. Her house in River Oaks, her investment portfolio, her first edition collection, and $3.2 million in carefully managed funds. I remember sitting there in my glass-walled office, staring at the skyline of Austin, my vision blurring. It wasn't just money. It was her. Her discipline, her sacrifices, the quiet way she built wealth brick by brick while never flashing it. When I told Patrick that night, I expected him to hold me, to say something soft about how proud she'd be. Instead, his eyes lit up. 3.2 million, he repeated, like he needed to taste the number. Camila, we're rich. We. That word slid into the room like a stranger. I smiled faintly at the time, chalking it up to excitement. We were married. Of course he'd say we. But something about the way he said it, like he'd just been promoted, stuck in my chest. Within 6 months, Patrick quit his job. I want to explore opportunities, he said casually over breakfast. And I want to support you. You've always been the driven one. Support me. What he meant was spend. He bought a Tesla Model S. Said it was for networking. Said investors expected a certain image. He joined Lakeway Country Club. Said it was about connections. He invested $45,000 in his friend's craft brewery without asking me. It collapsed within a year. When I questioned him, he'd lean back, offended. We're partners, he'd say. Why are you acting like this is your money and not ours? The phrasing would land like a slap. It was my grandmother's estate, protected under a prenup he'd signed without reading. But I hadn't yet learned how quickly affection could become entitlement. At the country club, I started noticing something else. Patrick introduced himself differently. He wasn't a regional manager anymore. He was an investor, an entrepreneur. He talked about our portfolio. He let people assume he'd built what I had inherited. One night, I overheard him laughing near the bar. Yeah, we've got family money, he told a man in a tailored blazer. Camila's grandmother left us a strong foundation. U.S. family money. My grandmother had met Patrick exactly twice before she died. I confronted him in the car that night. You're rewriting history, I said quietly. He gripped the steering wheel harder. Relax, that's just how these people talk. No, I replied. That's how you talk when you want to belong. He glanced at me, irritation flashing. Why are you so territorial about this? We're married. The argument simmered for days. But what unsettled me more wasn't the money. It was the subtle shifts. He started asking hypothetical questions. What happens if we ever split? Texas is a community property state, right? He'd frame it like curiosity, like casual conversation. But the questions kept coming. Then came the first appearance of a woman I'd only heard about in fragments, his ex-girlfriend, Lena Morales. He'd mentioned her once early in our relationship. She was intense, he'd said dismissively. Didn't understand ambition. I never thought much about it. Until one afternoon at Lakeway, she walked straight up to our table. She was beautiful, polished, confident in the way someone is when they've known you longer than your wife has. Patrick, she said warmly, ignoring me for half a second too long. He stood quickly. Lena, wow. Didn't know you were still in Austin. They hugged, not long, but not distant either. When he introduced me, she smiled in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. I've heard so much about you, she said. Congratulations on the inheritance. The word inheritance rolled off her tongue like a rumor she'd been following. Later that night, I asked him how she knew. He shrugged. People talk. Did you tell her? He hesitated. A flicker. Then, maybe. Why does it matter? It mattered because it felt like information leaking through cracks I hadn't noticed. Over the next few months, Lena appeared again. At charity events. At networking dinners. Always. Coincidentally. Once I caught them in a corner laughing too softly. When I approached, the laughter died instantly. You're being paranoid, Patrick told me later when I brought it up. Am I? I asked. He exhaled sharply. Camila, not every woman I've dated is a threat. The dismissal stung more than the suspicion, because I wasn't afraid of her romantically. I was afraid of something else. The way she looked at him when he talked about money. The way he straightened when she praised his business instincts. It was like she saw the version of him that existed in mirrors, not reality. Then came the spending escalation. Napa Valley vacations. Luxury watches. Private investment dinners where my money funded his image. Every time I pushed back, he'd twist it. You used to be fun, he said once. You used to trust me. Trust. That word again. Trust me with your heart. Trust me with your money. Trust me with your grandmother's life savings. The final crack before everything shattered came at a holiday party. Patrick stood in the living room, glass of wine in hand, telling a group of guests about our long-term wealth strategy. He described my grandmother's estate like it was a chess move he'd orchestrated. I watched from across the room, my skin buzzing. After the guests left, I confronted him. "You're rewriting the narrative," I said. He rolled his eyes. "You act like I'm stealing from you." The word hung there. Stealing. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he said something I still hear sometimes when the house is too quiet. "You needed me," he said flatly. "Before we met, you were just a lonely workaholic with no life. I gave you something to enjoy." It felt like the air left the room. I stared at him, and for the first time, I saw calculation instead of love. Maybe Lena hadn't been a coincidence. Maybe the questions about divorce law weren't curiosity. Maybe the "we're rich" wasn't excitement. It was strategy. But even then, I didn't yet know how deep it went. That realization came 6 months later, and it didn't arrive gently. It arrived in the form of an email thread he thought I'd never see. I didn't go looking for proof. That's the part I want to be honest about. I wasn't digging through his laptop like a suspicious wife hunting for lipstick on a collar. I wasn't trying to catch him cheating. I was trying to print a boarding pass. Patrick had left his laptop open on the kitchen island, email tab blinking. He'd asked me to check the flight details for Napa, another strategic networking weekend I was supposedly funding. I clicked the inbox without thinking, and there it was, an email chain titled Asset Strategy, Timing Considerations. My name in the subject line. My heart didn't race at first. It slowed, like my body was bracing before my mind could catch up. The sender was a law firm in Austin I didn't recognize. Below it, 3 messages from Patrick. I clicked. The first email was dated 4 months earlier. "Given the inheritance size, approximately $3.2 million, we'd like to evaluate optimal timing under Texas community property statutes. We, not I, we." The attorney's response was clinical. "If the inheritance has been commingled in any way, an argument may be made that portions are marital assets." I felt something cold settle into my chest. The next message made my hands tremble. "She keeps most of it separate, but we're working on shared expenditures that may support a claim." Working on, like I was a project, like my grandmother's estate was a target. And then a third participant added to the thread, Lena Morales. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grip the counter. Her email was short. "Make sure you document lifestyle contributions. Judges respond to narrative. Position him as emotional support during her grief. Emotional support. Position him." I read that line 3 times. The room tilted. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just entitlement. It was coordinated. The woman who'd smiled at me across a country club table, the woman who congratulated me on my inheritance, was helping my husband strategize how to take it. I closed the laptop slowly. My reflection in the darkened screen looked like someone I didn't recognize. Not devastated, not crying. Just clear. The illusion cracked so cleanly, it didn't even hurt at first. It just revealed what had been underneath the whole time. That night, I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I made dinner like normal. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day. Told me Lena had texted him about a charity event. He said her name so casually, like she wasn't co-authoring my financial execution. I smiled, and something inside me went silent. The next morning, I called Sarah Williamson. She answered on the second ring. "Camila?" "I need you to check something," I said. My voice sounded calm, detached. "If my inheritance has remained in separate accounts, and if there's been no commingling, is the prenup still ironclad?" There was a pause. "Have you commingled?" she asked carefully. "No." I'd been meticulous. Every transfer documented. Separate brokerage accounts. Separate tax filings. Even when Patrick insisted we simplify finances, I refused politely. I told him my grandmother always believed in clarity. He'd rolled his eyes. Now I was grateful for that instinct. "If you've kept it separate," Sarah said, "then yes, it's protected completely." I exhaled slowly. "And if he's been accumulating debt?" I asked. "Debt in whose name?" "His." Another pause. Then that's his too. I closed my eyes. For the first time since reading the email thread, I felt something sharp and steady rise through me. Not rage. Resolve. Over the next few weeks, I prepared. Quietly. Methodically. I gathered statements. Credit card balances. Tesla loan documents. Country club invoices. The failed brewery investment contracts. The total came to just over $110,000. All in his name. All signed by him. Every "we're partners" speech suddenly looked like manipulation. I didn't tip my hand. I watched him continue building his narrative. He started talking more openly about fair division. He asked hypothetical questions again. What if you ever decided you didn't want to be married? He said it lightly. Testing. And Lena? She became bolder. One evening, I walked into a gala fundraiser and saw them standing too close near the bar, her hand on his arm. His posture relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. When he noticed me, he stepped back immediately, but not fast enough. On the drive home, I asked him directly, "Are you planning to leave me?" He laughed. Where is this coming from? I didn't answer. Because the real question wasn't whether he was leaving. It was whether he thought he'd leave richer. The final confirmation came 2 weeks later. Another email. This time, the attorney wrote, "Filing first may strengthen leverage. Timing should precede any account restructuring." Precede. He was trying to beat me to it. To control the narrative, to blindside me. Instead, I did something he never expected. I filed first. When the process server handed him the divorce papers at the country club, in front of 3 men he'd been bragging to about our assets, I wasn't there, but I heard about it. He called me immediately. "What is this?" he demanded. "It's clarity," I said quietly. "You're overreacting." Am I? His tone shifted. "You're making a mistake." No, he had. 5 years earlier, when he signed a document he thought didn't matter. The weeks leading up to court were tense. He tried charm, then anger, then guilt. He accused me of being cold, of being paranoid, of letting money ruin our marriage. But the marriage had been eroding long before the money. The inheritance just exposed the cracks. The night before the hearing, he stood in the doorway of our bedroom. "This doesn't have to get ugly," he said. "It already is," I replied. He searched my face for weakness, for nostalgia, for the woman who'd once melted when he whispered promises over candlelight. She wasn't there anymore. The next morning, I placed the prenuptial agreement, copies certified and sealed, inside a manila envelope. Sarah had prepared it meticulously. Every clause initialed, every disclosure documented. The same document he signed without reading. The same document Lena had clearly forgotten existed. As I walked into that courtroom in Austin, I saw the confidence in his posture. He thought I was emotional. He thought I was reactive. He thought he'd outmaneuvered me. He didn't know I'd already seen the entire chessboard. Back in the present, Judge Martinez was still waiting. The courtroom was silent. Patrick's attorney looked relaxed. Patrick looked smug. He thought the story was about to end in his favor. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. The sound of paper sliding against paper echoed louder than it should have. I walked toward the bench slowly, heels steady against polished wood. I didn't look at Patrick. I didn't look at Lena, who was seated 2 rows back, pretending she was just another spectator. I handed the manila envelope to the bailiff. "Your Honor," I said clearly, "I believe the court should review this before any discussion of asset division." Judge Martinez accepted it, her expression unreadable. Patrick's attorney frowned. "Your Honor, we were not made aware of any additional filings." "Sit down, Mr. Callahan," Judge Martinez said calmly, already breaking the seal. The courtroom shifted. I could feel it, energy moving like static in the air. Patrick leaned forward in his chair, whispering to his attorney. I caught fragments. "She never mentioned, how is this?" Judge Martinez adjusted her glasses and began reading. She didn't rush. She never rushed. Each page turned with deliberate care, and with every second that passed, Patrick's confidence thinned. Finally, she looked up. "This appears to be a prenuptial agreement," she said evenly. "Executed 6 weeks prior to marriage. Signed by both parties, notarized, with full financial disclosures attached. Silence. The kind that presses against your ears. Patrick's attorney stood abruptly. Your Honor, my client has no recollection of... Mr. Callahan, the judge interrupted. Are you stating your client signed a legally binding contract without reading it? Patrick shifted in his seat. His jaw tightened. I skimmed it, he muttered. The judge raised an eyebrow. Did anyone coerce you into signing, Mr. Keller? No. Were you denied the opportunity to seek independent counsel? He hesitated. I waived it. The faintest ripple of restrained amusement passed through the courtroom. Judge Martinez continued reading aloud. Section 4, paragraph A. All premarital assets shall remain separate property. Patrick swallowed. Section 4, paragraph B. Any inheritance received during the marriage shall be considered separate property and not subject to division upon divorce. His knuckles whitened around the edge of the table. That can't be enforceable, he whispered harshly. Judge Martinez didn't even glance at him. Section 6. Neither party shall be entitled to spousal support, regardless of disparity in income. She looked up then. This clause was initialed individually by both parties. The reporter's pen scratched frantically. Patrick's attorney shuffled through the document, panic beginning to edge his movements. Your Honor, he said quickly, we may argue the agreement is unconscionable given the imbalance of assets. Mr. Callahan, Judge Martinez cut in, have you reviewed the financial disclosures attached? He flipped pages faster. Yes, Your Honor. And do they indicate Mrs. Hartwell provided complete documentation of her assets and anticipated inheritance at the time? Yes. Then on what basis are you asserting unconscionability? He faltered. There wasn't one. Patrick's breathing had changed. Shorter. Sharper. Like someone realizing the exit door had just locked behind him. Your Honor, I said calmly, rising once more. May I clarify something for the court? She nodded. When I received my grandmother's inheritance 18 months ago, I confirmed with counsel that it remained protected under the agreement. All funds were placed in separate accounts. No commingling occurred. Judge Martinez inclined her head slightly. Do you have documentation supporting that? Yes. Sarah handed me a second folder. This one was thicker, heavier. I passed it forward. Judge Martinez scanned the summary pages. Separate brokerage accounts, she murmured. Separate property designation maintained. No shared transfers. Patrick's attorney's shoulders sagged. It was over, but it wasn't finished. Your Honor, I added quietly, there is another matter. Patrick looked up sharply. I felt his eyes burn into me. Judge Martinez gestured for me to continue. Section 7 of the prenuptial agreement states that all debts incurred individually shall remain the responsibility of the incurring party. The judge turned to that page. And do you have evidence of such debts? Yes. The bailiff handed her the documentation. Credit card statements, Tesla loan, country club fees, brewery investment, total $110,384.27. Judge Martinez looked directly at Patrick. Mr. Keller, are these debts in your name? He looked at his attorney. His attorney didn't speak. Yes, Patrick said hoarsely. The judge folded her hands. Then under the terms of this agreement, you are not entitled to any portion of Mrs. Hartwell's premarital assets, business holdings, or inheritance. A pause. And you remain solely responsible for the listed debts. The words landed like a gavel before the gavel even struck. Patrick's mouth opened slightly. Nothing? He asked, voice cracking. Nothing, she confirmed. The room buzzed now, whispers spreading like wildfire. Patrick's face drained of color. 5 years of positioning. 5 years of charm. 5 years of assuming he was smarter than the woman he married. Gone. Your Honor, his attorney tried weakly. 5 years of marriage must count for something. It does, Judge Martinez replied coolly. It counts as 5 years in which your client chose not to read a legally binding contract. The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. Then, the gavel struck. The court grants the divorce petition filed by Mrs. Hartwell. No asset transfer shall occur. Individual debts remain with the responsible party. Court is adjourned. The sound reverberated through the room like thunder. Patrick didn't move, didn't blink. It was as if someone had unplugged him. Lena, in the back row, had gone very still. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. As the courtroom began to empty, reporters whispering, phones lighting up, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Relief. Like air filling lungs that had been compressed for years. Sarah leaned close. He underestimated you, she murmured. No, I said quietly. He underestimated consequences. I gathered my purse. The envelope was empty now, its purpose fulfilled. Behind me, I heard Patrick stand abruptly. Camila, he called. His voice sounded different, smaller, desperate. I turned slowly. The golden boy expression was gone. All that remained was a man staring at the ruins of his own strategy. We need to talk, he said. There was no smugness left, only panic. And something else. Fear. The hallway outside the courtroom felt brighter than it should have. Fluorescent lights, marble floors. The low murmur of people pretending not to stare. Camila, wait. Patrick's voice echoed behind me, stripped of arrogance now. I paused, but I didn't turn immediately. I let him walk toward me. For 5 years, he had always been the one walking ahead. Today, he was the one chasing. When I finally faced him, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not charm, not confidence, not calculation. Panic. This isn't over, he said, lowering his voice. We can appeal. There are angles your lawyer didn't consider. There aren't, I replied calmly. He stepped closer. You're really going to walk away like this? After everything? After everything. The phrase almost made me laugh. After the emails. After the coordinated strategy. After Lena's involvement. After he tried to file first so he could control the narrative. You walked away first, I said quietly. You just didn't tell me. His jaw tightened. That prenup was a trap, he snapped. You made it sound like it was nothing. I held his gaze steadily. It was nothing, I said, to someone who wasn't planning to use me. That landed. He flinched, not physically, but in the way his expression flickered. Behind him, I could see Lena standing near the exit doors, pretending to scroll through her phone, but her eyes kept darting toward us. She looked less polished now, less certain. Because the version of Patrick she'd aligned herself with, the strategic winner, the soon-to-be millionaire, had just evaporated. Patrick followed my line of sight and noticed her watching. For a split second, something raw passed between them. Calculation recalibrating, reality settling. You don't have to do this, he said more softly now, shifting tactics. We were good together. Were we? I thought about the early days, the lake proposal, the warmth of his hand at my back, the way I believed him when he said he loved me for me. I thought about the night he called me territorial for protecting my grandmother's legacy. I thought about the email where Lena advised him to position himself as emotional support during my grief. You loved the lifestyle, I said evenly, not me. That's not fair. No, I replied. What you tried to do wasn't fair. He ran a hand through his hair, the perfectly styled image now slightly disheveled. You're going to regret this, he muttered. People will talk. They already are, I said, glancing toward the reporters near the stairwell. He exhaled sharply. 5 years has to mean something. It does, I answered. He looked up, hopeful. It means I learned. That was the moment something inside him truly collapsed. Not because he lost money, but because he lost access. Access to the narrative. Access to my wealth. Access to the version of himself that thrived beside my success. You think you've won? He asked bitterly. This wasn't a game. For him, it had been an investment, a long-term strategy, a payout plan. For me, it had been a marriage. I never married you for your money, he said defensively. I held his stare. You didn't have to, I replied. You married me for the possibility of it. Silence stretched between us. He had no rebuttal. Because the truth was sitting there, exposed under courthouse lights. Behind him, Lena finally approached. Patrick, she said softly, almost urgently, we should go. We. There it was again. He glanced at her, then back at me. Something passed over his face. Shame? Pride? Resentment? Maybe all three. You're making a mistake, he told me one last time. I smiled faintly. No, I said. You made a mistake 5 years ago when you signed something you thought didn't matter. His eyes darkened. I adjusted my purse strap on my shoulder, the same purse that had carried the envelope, the same envelope that had dismantled his entire plan. As I turned to leave, he called my name once more. Not angrily, not arrogantly, almost pleading. Camila. I didn't stop. The courthouse doors opened, warm Austin air spilling inside. Outside, the world hadn't paused. Cars moved, people walked. Life continued. Reporters approached cautiously. Mrs. Hartwell, any comment? I stopped briefly. Yes, I said. Marriage is built on trust, not strategy. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't vengeful. It was true. They scribbled quickly. Behind me, I could hear Patrick arguing quietly with Lena. The tone wasn't affectionate. It was tense. Because now there was no inheritance to orbit, no millions to justify ambition, just $110,000 in debt and a reputation bruised in public view. I stepped into the sunlight. For the first time in months, my shoulders felt light, not because I'd destroyed him, but because I'd protected what mattered. My grandmother's house remained in River Oaks. Her first edition still lined the shelves in my study. Her investment portfolio still bore her name. And Hartwell Tech Solutions? Still mine. Still growing. Still built on work, not opportunism. That night, I walked through my home alone. The silence felt different. Not empty. Peaceful. I paused in my grandmother's old reading chair and ran my fingers along the worn leather armrest. She used to tell me something when I was younger. Camila, always read what you sign, and always read the people you trust. I smiled softly. I had learned both. Patrick Keller thought he was marrying into a fortune. He didn't realize he was marrying into preparation. And when he tried to take half of what wasn't his, the very signature he dismissed became the reason he left with nothing. No inheritance. No alimony. No assets, just consequences. Some lessons are expensive. His cost $110,384.27. Mine cost 5 years. But I walked away with my dignity and my freedom.